Welcome to the Jordan B.Peterson podcast. I'm Michaela Peterson. This is Season 4, Episode 38. This episode was recorded on May 10th, 2021. In this episode, my dad's joined by Dr. Randy Thornhill. Dr. Thornhill is an American entomologist and evolutionary biologist. He's authored and co-authored about 250 scientific publications, and his work has been cited over 35,000 times. Dad and Dr. Thornhill discuss Dr. Thornhill's findings on attractiveness, as well as other subjects like cryptic female choice, symmetry, carotenoid pigments, and the characteristics of attractiveness. I hope you enjoy this episode and enjoy your week.
Hello, everybody. I'm pleased to have with me today one of the world's great biologists, Dr. Randy Thornhill. He's an evolutionary biologist and distinguished professor of biology emeritus at the University of New Mexico, with a primary interest in animal behavior and psychology, as well as human behavior and psychology. Dr. Thornhill and his colleagues have authored or co-authored about 250 scientific publications, including 4 research monographs or books. His publications have been cited in the scientific literature more than 35,000 times. A citation score is the number of times a reference to a given piece of research is cited by another researcher or in another publication by the same author. A scientific citation count in the tens of thousands clearly indicates that a researcher occupies a position in the upper echelons of scientific influence. Dr. Thornhill is a founder of the research disciplines of behavioral ecology, evolutionary psychology, evolutionary aesthetics. That's the study of the experience of beauty from an evolutionary perspective, evolution and human behavior, the modern study of adaptation, and the study of sexual coercion. Dr. Thornhill, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've come across your research a number of times in my career, struck by its originality and its impact. I'd like to ask you first about something I probably ran into, maybe it's 20 years ago, maybe it's 15, something like that. You did some work on the perception of attractiveness, bilateral symmetry, averageness, and sexual selection. Can you outline what you found and why?
Yes, I did work some years ago now in human attractiveness, and that turned out to be very productive about attractiveness in general in animals. And one of the key traits that animals look at in judging physical attractiveness of partners, of mates, is bilateral symmetry. And a colleague and I in the early 90s came up with a way to measure facial symmetry in humans. It had been worked on before, but the measurements that they used didn't work. So we came up with a method that did work, measuring bilateral symmetry in the face. So that is the symmetry of the two sides of the face.
Why is that important, and why is it a marker for attractiveness?
It turns out that bilateral symmetry is a measure of developmental health. And so the organism, when it starts developing, it's designed by evolution, by selection, to achieve a bilaterally symmetric form. You can think of that, this is the case. When I say organisms, I mean all forward-moving organisms. All forward-moving organisms have adaptations, developmental adaptations, to achieve a bilaterally symmetric body, because first of all, that reduces drag. So if you're moving forward and you're bilaterally symmetric, you don't have any drag in your movement. You can think about a person with a leg a bit shorter than the other, and there's drag in the forward movement. The more of that asymmetry, the more drag. So you lose efficiency in movement. That's fundamental to what bilateral symmetry is about. But next, bilateral symmetry is very hard. Perfect bilateral symmetry is very, very hard to achieve by development. So it's a marker of quality of the individual pertaining to its developmental health.
We see in many things that human beings design to move forward bilateral symmetry. Automobiles are bilaterally symmetrical. Airplanes are bilaterally symmetrical.
Yeah.
So
we like our world to be that way. Yeah, we like our world to be that way. Actually, it turns out. And
you're associating it with the
same principle. If you had one side of the car asymmetric compared to the other side of the car, then there'd be more drag. It's not an efficient. You'd use more gas. Think about it that way. In driving down the road with an asymmetric car. But so this is one component of physical attractiveness, bilateral symmetry. And we looked first, when we developed this way to measure facial symmetry, that became a very hot research topic. We did the first, and then others followed very quickly. And lots of research has been done now. But there's, symmetry of movement that's important in how fluid one's movement is and how attractive, therefore, one's movement is. You're not dragging your foot or whatever. And all that is really a component of the importance of health in physical attractiveness. So physical attractiveness, fundamentally, is a health certification. That's how we judge people's attractiveness. We don't think about it consciously. It's an unconscious calculation of the traits important in health. And developmental health, as bilateral symmetry, is one of these. So you measure the symmetry of the two sides of the face, and we showed in our first study of this way back now that that measurement relates to how attractive faces are perceived. Faces of the same sex or opposite sex. And then that research went on to look at kids looking at faces and different ethnic groups looking at faces. It works like a charm wherever you do it. Lots and lots of research.
And so does it mean that if you show people symmetrical or asymmetrical faces, that they obviously have a preference for the symmetrical faces? Will they look longer at the symmetrical faces? Will infants look longer at symmetrical faces?
Yes, they do. Yeah, that's the way the infant beauty research is done. You just look at whether the baby, and they got it down now to almost newborns, looking at faces and judging these faces basically on the basis of interest, how long they look at the face versus getting distracted to something